In this episode, we talk about social justice and spirituality. To some, these topics are as scary as the boogeyman or el cucuy. Please have no fear. We'll turn on the light, check the closet, and check under the bed. Join us as we discuss definitions and bridge connections between these two theoretical and practical ideologies. Welcome to Unexamined Me, where social justice meets spirituality. We're your hosts, Stephanie Bowman,
Nicole Andrews,
and Julie Brock. Together, we examine our holistic identity to uncover what's not working in order to address and change behaviors and mindsets.
We invite you to join us as we move from an unexamined life to an activated, holistic life dedicated to social justice and well-being.
Welcome, Julie, episode 2.
Whoop, whoop. Here we go. I'm so excited
Yeah.
because we're diving in. I mean, I find you and I to be delightful and very interesting, but now we're going to the deep. I can't wait.
Yes. And we can kind of get into our brains of how we it's both of these topics I think are topics that people don't like to talk about. Number one.
Yeah.
And number two, it's not a Midwest thing to bring these things up.
Oh Lord, no.
So I just love that we're like, you know what? Let's just talk about them both together and then do the super scary thing which show the connection between how both of them are intertwined.
Yeah, I'm ready for it. I think it's really apropos as we are recording this on January 19th. For those who are in the States, tomorrow is the observed day for Martin Luther King Jr. And also it's Inauguration Day. So I think it's good that we're going to sort of dive into spirituality and how that intersects with social justice right now at this time. Now, this is also for all of our global friends and neighbors as well, because this is not a topic that is at all limited to where you're from. However, like Stephanie said, in the Midwest, it's understanding where you're from and the environment that you're in and how it affects these and what impacts it has on the concept of your spirituality and your social justice.
Yeah. But also, like, who we choose as a president is 1000% connected to how the world then reacts to that.
Okay.
I'm not saying that one choice is better than the other. Like, trust me, and I think people who know me, this is going to be no shock, but this whole two-party system is just like, it's not like, oh, which person is better? It's like, no, they're all going to do the same thing. It doesn't matter. We're both going to continue this terrible cycle of destroying the earth and literally every single organism living on it. So it's so connected, but I feel like as the news started coming in that Donald Trump won again, I had so many folks being like, okay, it's time to build community. Like, we're done with, I think there's a lot of just acceptance that maybe we're not gonna be able to vote our way into freedom. We're gonna have to just do it ourselves. And I like that's just so connected to what we're talking about here is if we want to build a community to better our lives, to better our community lives, and to better the lives of this universe, we're gonna need to start doing some work on ourselves. And so I would love it, Julie, if you could kick us off with what what is the boogeyman of spirituality or el cucuy, or why don't we talk about it? Why is it the scary thing that hides under our bed?
Ooh, that's such a good question. Well, and I think part of it is because spirituality has been evasive for humans. So
Mhm.
humans try to take spirituality and put it into a very easily digestible box. So, and I think trying to find a way that can explain it for folks, because it is such a nebulous and complex concept.
Mhm.
But when we talk about spirituality here on Unexamined Me, the best way that I can describe spirituality is it's the soul's purpose. Um, Always a choice, right? So this isn't something that is already fated, already written in the stars. It just means that as we grow and as we shape ourselves through experiences through our lifetime, there are opportunities for us to express our soul's purpose, the very best reason why we're here and what we have to contribute to the world, because we all have something to contribute. And spirituality here, when we describe it, we're talking about the deep connection to ourselves as well as connection to other. And when I say other, I mean the universal source, however you describe that. Some people describe that as God, Allah, Yahweh, divine creator, divine source, goddess. There's a lot of different words that express source, but essentially it is this bigger energy. It's this bigger idea or experience, much past our humanity.
Mhm.
And then the other connection is to other beings. And we have folks on this earth that are like animal whisperers. They are so connected to the animal world. And that's where we have just these beautiful biological researchers, right? And that's their soul's purpose. They were
Or
here.
like Caesar Milan.
Yes, exactly. Dog
That
whisperer.
dude's
Hello,
he's on
right?
a whole nother literal spiritual connection to
Totally.
gods. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So those are the things that we're talking about. We're also talking about the intersectionality of our spiritual health with our mental health and our physical health. So
Mhm.
those are the kind of the three big pieces of our identity, of our existence, and they are interconnected. So things that have effect, like things that have effect over our own awareness of our soul's purpose, are things like our experiences. If we have untreated trauma, um, if we have mental health issues, if we have physical health issues, if we have energetic issues, both at the personal or at the collective level, the inability to listen to ourselves over the voices of others, right?
Mhm.
These are all things that impact or that can distract us from understanding and listening to our soul's purpose. So people will ask, like, what does this have to do with intuition, or what's the difference between intuition and soul's purpose?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Or I guess point out something. So it's you talked about choice. Um and I think that's such a great way of looking at it. So it's you have a choice in the way in which your soul moves through this world, right? We might not have a choice on, like, if we experienced trauma, we didn't get to choose to experience trauma,
Right.
but we do have the power to figure out how we're going to move through that, knowing that that happened to us. And I think just that conversation of choice is so important, that, like you said, like, these things aren't laid out. And, like, okay, even though we can take a whole nother episode and talk about the fact that I believe like half the people here are like AI robots, but like, like, we're not operating under some, like, there's not someone playing us as a Sims telling us to, like,
Right.
decorate our house this way. Like, we're making an active choice in everything we do. And you're making an active choice whether you choose to invest in your soul's purpose, or you choose to investigate your soul's purpose, or you
Right.
choose to ignore it. The same way as our mental
Yes.
health. Are we choosing to engage in it, or are we choosing to ignore it? Either way, it's a choice. Um, and I think that's such a, I think, like, such a good through line for this podcast is you have a choice. You're always making a choice.
Absolutely.
And therefore you are in charge of what happens or not. But also like you have that power.
Right. Which I think is what sometimes will scare people. And I think why spirituality then was very often shoved into a box, right? And whether that is and kind of like a our way or no way sort of box. And I think it was not necessarily intent, like consciously, except that I think it is. I think it's consciously trying to control other people. And
Well, yeah, because if you can if you can control other people and you can control the outcomes, does that then provide your little like radar of safety to like turn off because
right,
you know what's going to happen because you have controlled it all.
right, right.
Which is
Yeah.
terrifying.
Exactly. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about listening to others over listening to self, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where when we try to hit the easy button because choice feels too big,
Mm-hmm.
that I think is when we give power over to ego. So let's talk a little bit about ego.
Mm-hmm.
Ego, you'll hear it in the world in all sorts of different ways, right? Like, oh, ego, ego, ego. Well, let's just talk about ego within its purpose and why we all have ego.
Mm-hmm.
So ego lives in the amygdala brain. And the amygdala brain is our limbic system brain. It is the language of the limbic system is, am I safe? Okay. So all information goes through that system first. It goes through the limbic system and says, am I safe? Ego is part of that language. And ego, no matter what, whether it's rational, irrational, conscious, or unconscious, ego's job is to keep us safe. The problem is that when we evolved, past having saber-toothed tigers like tromping down and trying to kill us for dinner, um, ego hasn't really evolved yet. So ego, I don't know, ego has somebody cut ego off while driving. Now no drivers are safe. Okay, ego has experienced a toxic environment in the workplace. Now all workplaces are toxic, right? So ego is always looking for the unsafe. Ego's always looking for the negative. And what will happen is that if we give our lives over to ego, if we make that choice, then we live a very fearful life. And fear doesn't allow us to access the counter to ego, which is intuition. Intuition is the purest voice of who we are. Intuition is the voice of our soul's purpose. Intuition is the voice of that connection. And intuition, when we can get quiet, is constantly talking to us about what is right and good about us, what we have to provide for the world. It's not as loud as ego. So you really have to listen to intuition because sometimes it's like, hey, have you considered this? And because we are a being of choice, intuition isn't going to tell us how to do something. Intuition is going to invite us to make a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And that's different than ego. Ego's like, stay safe. Don't even leave the house. And intuition says, of course, leave the house and then find some beauty and some action out there that you can provide for others. So
Mm-hmm.
understanding your soul and understanding what intuition is saying is actually the antidote to an overactive ego.
So much in that.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so I'm like all about analogies. Okay, so if we're in a car and we're driving, like I have a Chihuahua. And my little Chihuahua, Roland, um, like he loves sitting in the passenger seat and he gets like all big and brave and barks at literally everything all the time. Like cow, bark. Person next to us in their own car, not even looking at us, bark. We stopped at a light. I'm gonna get up and see what it is. And he's like literally just like sometimes I'm like, are you just like looking for things to bark at? So like is that kind of like our ego? Like it's just always like up at alert, like, oh, I see something. I don't know what it is. I'm just gonna bark at it and I'm gonna point your attention to it. Like I don't know if you're paying attention or not, but this is immediately unsafe. Everyone's trying to murder us all the time from my little
Yes.
Chihuahua's brain.
Yes. Yes. That Roland is our ego.
And I would not let Roland drive.
No, no. And that's such a great, yeah. Okay. So we're going to kill another analogy. I love this. So if we keep this analogy going, I have generalized anxiety disorder, diagnosed when I was 33. I've had it since my entire life. So one of the analogies that my therapist gave me was driving in a car and recognizing that you can drive or anxiety can drive. So if we take this parallel, the first thing for us to understand is like, who are all the passengers in our car? Who's all there? Because I will tell you, I have anxiety, I have ego, I have inner child who's like, hey, could we just play? Could we just like have some fun here? Life isn't all that serious all the time.
A park.
Ooh, a park. Let's go swing. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I have societal messaging that I've picked up.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing with that car passenger is they very rarely drive, but they whisper.
Are they like a backseat driver?
100%.
Ugh.
Yeah. And so then I'm like, well, wait a second. Why did I get off on this exit? This is not where we were headed. And then I'm like, oh, societal messaging. And they smirk in the back. They're like, yeah, I'm that good. I'm that good. Right. I don't ever have to take the wheel. Where ego, I can see ego like jumping over, like they're in the third passenger seat. They're like, no, 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 no. And they're jumping over seats and grabbing my wheel. So yeah, I think, part of our ability to stay in the driver's seat is just understanding where all of our other passengers are and what their motive is. So I'm not kicking ego out of the car because that's not like it's just not they're going to make their way back, right? It's not like running on the side of the road like Will Ferrell. What? You forgot me. So they'll find their way back. So it's not about like shutting down ego. Ego has a job. Ego has a job. But if I listen, if I make sure that intuition is in the driver's seat or like the passenger and is navigating, then intuition will tell me whether or not I need to listen to ego.
So it's like intuition, like our automated GPS system. Like it's trying to find you the best route to get to your destination.
Yes. And it's still up to you to choose the right route.
Right. Because like it's like fastest route, shortest route,
right,
more
exactly
economic route. Like is it basically saying like here are the routes you can take to get to your goal? You decide what route you want to be on.
Yep.
And then if you choose to engage your inner child and take a pit stop over at this park, it's gonna then reroute you from that destination back to where you want to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the thing is like, and it's not as intense as like our map apps, right? Rerouting. It's more like right, exactly. It's more like, oh, we found our way here. Great. Let me know where you want to go from here.
Mm.
Because clearly you've rerouted for a reason. That's awesome. Take as much time as you need. And then you might feel it. Then you're like, or we could leave. There's some choices here. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
so it's a different sort of, it's louder than societal messaging whispering because it wants always what is right and good for us. Intuition is always going for what our soul's purpose is. Like that's what it is promoting. So ego is suppressing, ego is trying to keep us safe, where intuition is like, you have all of this greatness to share with others. How will you choose to do that today? How will you choose to honor the greatness in you for your sake and making sure that you have enough to share with others? So intuition isn't about keeping us safe, though they like safety, you know, like they like that, but safety to them is about the pureness of your expression. The safety of intuition is the pureness of your expression of your purpose. That was a lot of P's.
Really, the fact that the intuition is a kinder GPS system.
Yeah.
And then I've got ego is my little barking chihuahua who barks at everyone. And we've got
Yes.
it's starting to be a bus at this point instead of like a 2-passenger vehicle of all these thoughts and lenses that we have that we navigate through, and we get to decide who sits where.
Yeah, exactly.
Because
Exactly.
if
And
not, ego will try to drive.
ego is going to fill up that entire car if given the ability to do so. So it really is about recognizing that it's not about suppressing, right? Because when we suppress, things get bigger in the unconscious. It's more about expressing, recognizing when it is appropriate for something to be expressed and when it's not. So I, grew up in the 80s and the 90s. And in that time period, body shaming was huge, huge. And I picked up a lot of that. And so now, as a 50-year-old woman who has, in the throes of perimenopause, has a lot of fluctuating weight, has a lot of fluctuating skin things. I'm like, oh, hey, look, apparently my entire chin is going to break out overnight. Huh, weird. Like those are things that are out of my control to a certain extent. Like there's choices that I can make with diet. There's choices that I can make. But societal messaging says, you're never going to be that small. You're never going to have the same skin that you had when you're 18. Of course I'm not. Of course I'm not. And I'm not supposed to. But we don't have really strong messaging that's like, yay, you're a middle-aged woman. Welcome. We're excited to have your power and experience here. Like that is not necessarily the US conversation about aging women. And so again, when societal message comes up and is like loud from the back, I have to, I will say, I'm like, oh, of course you're there. Of course. And guess what? You're right. I'm not going to have the same skin as I did when I was 18, and that's okay. Thanks. Thanks for popping up. And I'm going to keep driving here. It's not about societal message, get out, shut up, because you're not going to shame or berate yourself to anything. And so it's just about that acceptance of like, oh, you're in my car. Huh. And now sometimes untreated trauma can end up in your car. And then you have a choice. Would you like untreated trauma or treated trauma in your car? Would you like the smaller version of societal messaging or the bigger version? Right. So it's about making those choices because it's because we're complex humans. And with that complexity comes all these different aspects of ourselves. And it's not about making those disappear. It's about understanding them and understanding their impact on the choices that then we then make.
Yeah. Yeah. Which then I think goes into like social justice.
Absolutely.
Like specifically, you know, if we think about social justice and this car metaphor and literally everything we've been talking about, but now just put on that lens of now we're going to be talking about social justice. Like there is so much societal messaging going on, and I I believe as a world right now, we allow ego and social messaging to drive our purpose for social justice. And so when we have both of them driving, we either have people like not even start, like they don't even want to get in the car because ego is so loud and they're afraid of everything and everyone. Or you've got people willing to have societal messaging drive the car, which then leads to unconscious bias and all of these other things that we're just perpetuating systems of oppression knowingly or unknowingly. But then like egos freaking got a map, like, oh, we should go here because this is going to be a terrible place and it's going to be terrifying and we're all going to die. And it's like, oh, okay, how about none of those actually drive the car? Those need to go in the back when we talk about social justice. So I think that's just like one thing as we navigate not only this conversation but conversations as we move forward when we're talking about social justice, oppression, privilege, power, is I'm asking you to get in the car. And I'm asking you to get in the car knowing that you're bringing all these thoughts and folks with you. But as we navigate, I kind of want you to figure out who's sitting where.
Yes.
And then kindly ask them to scoot over, move over, change seats, rotate, so that you can actively engage in these conversations without having
And
all
you
these
can,
defensive mechanisms.
right. And you can actually get to a destination. Because I think what ego wants to do is say, it's too big, it's too large. Like, look at all of these different problems in the world. You can't possibly take them all on. It's not worth it. What if somebody comes at you on social media? What if somebody comes at you, in your feed? What if somebody in your family or your friends? And it's like, time out, ego, slow down, right? And it's really up to us to kind of hold hands with intuition and say, I am part of society, and there are big problems in the world. How can I best be part of a solution? I am not the solution. They're too big for us to tackle by ourselves, but we are equipped to join others. And when we can get clear about what we have to offer, then it becomes clearer as to what our destination is. So speaking of that, Stephanie, would you be willing to like break down when we talk about social, when we talk about justice, like when we describe those concepts, what do they mean?
Yeah. Yeah, so both Julie and I, right? This is our podcast, and so therefore you're viewing it through our lens. And this is how we view social justice. There are thousands of definitions for social justice. Some are very, very small and direct, and some are so large that it's kind of hard to grasp to. But I'm going to provide us a context and a description that actually isn't either left or right of any political ideology. I'm actually like up into the like I don't know, like we're talking I'm talking about a completely different plane of thinking than the current conversation is on social justice. So if we break up the word justice, justice is currently in this time and space in which we live, it's about law and order, right? It's about something is not right, and so therefore we have to make it right. But who's defining what's right in the world? Like that feels icky, and so nope, that's not what that means to us. It's also, we're not talking about fairness. We're not talking about like, well, everyone's gonna get one red apple and it's all gonna be this exact same size, because that's not fitting a need. You're now just like handing out apples because you think people want that. Like, we're not actually talking about anything when we talk about fairness. We're kind of actually just feeding someone else in the car who doesn't need to be like, they don't need to be talking or running or driving the car, let alone. Justice really is the freedom to be in its most stripped down form. Justice is just the freedom to be. Like, we know, we talked about like last episode, like dogs know how to dog, and giraffes know how to giraffe. Like, they have the freedom to be. We
Right.
as humans do not have the freedom to be because we don't have social justice yet. We're all being forced to be, or conform, or to act, or to respond to, in these narratives and these ways in which someone, and we can start naming it, the patriarchy, heterosexism, cissexism, white supremacy, all of these systems are telling us, here's what justice is, and here's how, here's what you need to do to, to achieve racial justice. But that almost is, in a way, through a lens of white supremacy. So what
Oh,
if,
it is.
yeah,
It fully is.
because now we're like, yeah, so we're viewing all these forms of justice through actually a narrative and a lens of the oppressive systems. And so if we really just break it down to the it is just a freedom to be, that allows us to figure out who we are as a human, and then start bringing in, like, okay, here's my soul's purpose, and then here's my soul's purpose as a cisgender person. Here's my soul's purpose as a person of the global majority. Here's my soul's purpose as someone who knows multiple languages. That, I feel like that's a whole entire conversation that we don't allow ourselves to have.
Right. And because it asks us to slow down and consider each of those concepts. And as you were talking, I was thinking about this idea of purpose and soul's purpose. And, when we talk about social justice and when we talk about soul's purpose, these are benevolent forces, right? We are not, as humans, perhaps we haven't evolved fully toward the ability to utilize all the parts of our brains to discuss and to negotiate and to make concessions to allow more people to be able to express themselves as they are. As we're sitting here, we've got peace talks that are hopefully going to see themselves all the way through in Gaza. We still have a war happening in Ukraine. And these are things that are not benevolent, and they're not socially just. So when we talk about these concepts, people will come at me and they'll say, well, what if my soul's purpose is to burn it all down? Okay, tell me more. What are we burning, and at whose expense? And is that good for the collective? Because if the answer is no, then really evaluate who's in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
Because it might just be that it's not soul or intuition. It might be that it's ego. So, because as we consider social justice in the way that Stephanie has described it, it is starting to re-examine and truly slow down to consider whose lens are we looking at this through? Who built this system? Why is the system here? How does my soul's purpose fit into this? Is it appropriate for me to be in this conversation, or is it not? Because the thing is like, not every conversation is for us. Not every social justice topic is for us.
Like
but
we sometimes don't get to go on the adventure.
Yeah.
But guess what? It's our job to make sure that the bus is safe, or maybe you get to be the one who packs the snacks or fills up the gas. Like that may be your role. It might not be actually getting on the bus and going.
Right. And that's okay. And we should be,
let alone like fucking driving the car. Like everybody, one driver.
One driver. Right. And I think and I think sometimes that's hard for, especially in the US, where the systems that we are operating under are through the lens of whiteness and through the lens of white supremacy. It is hard, I think, sometimes for white people to accept that, because everything has always been for us. Everything. Because we created it. What do you mean
I don't get to go?
Right.
But I organized this.
Exactly. Fabulous.
But I paid $25.
Yeah. Well, you get to check the tires. Go.
If we think about, so we're going back to justice is the freedom to be, and it is to find our soul's purpose. Then what does the word social mean in front of it? So, because if justice is the freedom for us to be ourselves, then the word social in front of it is then who we are as a person, like as your singular body, who we are as a community, whether those being the people who live in the same unit as you do, or the people you interact with, or we start expanding that sense of community to end of being the global community, the larger community. But it really makes me think of the philosophical lens and like theoretical lens of Ubuntu, which is an African Zulu proverb. So part of that community building, I was really able to learn that when I was in college. I was part of a group called Awareness Through Performance, and that was led by Amanda Goodenough. Amanda's an amazing person. She also has, I'm gonna shout her out here, Amanda Goodenough. She does amazing work with all sorts of not only individuals, but large groups, businesses, education settings. So that's that piece of it. Shout out Amanda. She's great. If you don't know her, you should. But Awareness Through Performance was a organization that you had to try out for. There was like a group of 20 college students, and for 7 days your job was to create a skit, an hour and a half long skit. It was so cool. It was like written, directed, edited, produced by college students. It was fantastic. To then talk through some social justice terms, right? And so you had folks coming in from so many different parts of the world at times, but lenses and upbringings. And, you know, we, for the most part, most of us were so young, like 18 to 25, that you're like in that lens where you think you know it all and you know nothing. And it was in that we actually learned about Ubuntu. So Ubuntu is an African Zulu proverb that talks about this reciprocal nature. So I am you, you are me. The harm that I do unto you, I do unto myself. And it wasn't only just learned by reading it. Like reading it itself is powerful, but we had all these groups who are social justice activist warriors. You know, we thought we were going to just take on the world and we were all great people, and we just kept harming each other
Mm.
because we kept wanting to drive. We
Somebody
kept,
else's car.
yeah, instead of sitting and listening to, hey, you know what, I don't know that experience. um you know, like I can just say, like as a cisgender person, like that was the first time I was able to listen and learn from trans folks, from non-binary folks. And there were times where cis folks were trying to like tell the story. We're like, oh, but it'd be better if you did this, or it'd be better, and not understanding that that's not our place. That's not Ubuntu. Well, that actually is, because while we were harming them by not listening to them, we were harming ourselves by not being able to just sit down and shut the fuck up.
Right. Right.
Like,
And sometimes that's what we need to do.
yeah. And it took people saying that in probably a much nicer way of like, hey, this is privilege and you need to sit down. This is
Right.
not about you. We're
And
creating and carving space for others.
right. And privilege lives next to ego.
Oh my God, they're best friends.
They are best friends. Right. And too often, again, privilege unexamined, best friends with ego. Privilege examined is, of course I would have thought that because I grew up a cisgendered white woman
Mm-hmm.
in a small rural town of wealthy, affluent white farmers. And that was all I knew.
Mm-hmm.
So until we examine privilege to say, oh, not everyone grew up as part of dominant culture, therefore all the systems work for me. I mean, I am a woman,
Mm-hmm.
but still I'm a white woman.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I can speak male because that's the thing is like so often we try to shove spirituality or shove social justice into the box of other. Like let's shove
Right.
this into this box of dominant culture, and you're going to be successful if you pick up the rules that are in this box. But at
Mm-hmm.
what cost? My soul is too big for that box. Your soul is too
Mm-hmm.
big for that box. And that system may or may not been made with Ubuntu at the core.
Yeah, no.
And most of our systems aren't. They're made with ego at the core.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah. I think we need to do a whole podcast on like ego, fear, and like our brain.
Yeah.
Because there's so much in that. But yeah, like it says, if you're terrified, right? If you have ego driving, saying that's scary, that's scary, that's scary, that's scary, then you're not going to go anywhere.
Exactly. Exactly. And now you're so overwhelmed by how everything is terrifying. You don't have the space to consider whether or not it really is. Is that
Yeah.
based on an old story? Is that based on something like untreated trauma? Is that based on a message that I picked up that is not mine anymore? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we could talk about this all day long.
But it's also like a two-way mirror, right? Like if we you're almost like using it as like, well, I'm protected behind this mirror and I get to observe other people and do all these things. But like unbeknownst to you, like I don't know how to connect that, but it just feels like if we let ego, unconscious bias, conscious bias, if we let these systems of oppression rule or at least dictate, create the fucking board game, create the rules, we will never be living out our soul's purpose because it's not aligned.
Right.
Like, I for sure as hell am not born on this earth to can sit behind a computer and work and try and argue as to why my existence is valuable or why maybe like you should listen to women of color. Like that just I'm like I'm being distracted by something so that I don't get to live out my soul's purpose.
There it is. Right. And part of that is, you know, if you zoom out, um, so let's just take the idea of work in general. So we're working at that computer and we're being fed a message. This is what valuable work is based on the position description that you applied on and you were hired for. But we know so much more goes into work than that. Right. And it comes down to valuing the people in those positions. And it's creating an environment in which I get the freedom, the justice to be who I am and express myself within that position that I signed up for and that you hired me to do.
Mm-hmm.
I should have autonomy in how I am able to do that work. And yet so often what happens is that I do it in a way that isn't quote unquote part of culture, of whose culture, of what culture, right? You're just not, maybe not a great fit. Well, what does that mean? Fit by whose standard, right? Well, you know, you're rocking the boat. Well, if the boat is toxic, like male toxicity and somebody commenting on my clothing or my body type or my body size, that's a boat that I'm willing to rock because it has nothing to do with the quality of the work that I'm producing.
And
So
like, how fragile is your boat that like us asking one question or pointing out, hey, tell me more about this, like just disrupts your whole
right.
flow. Like that doesn't sound like a pretty sturdy boat.
And it's definitely not one that I want to ride in.
No, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Because I think we have a lot of people in fragile boats because they haven't examined their purpose. They picked up that voice in the back of like, well, now is the time. Now is the time in our culture that you get a partner. Now is the time in our culture where you level up in your career. You know, like we have these societal norms that are part of these systems that we haven't examined. So then we just move through them like these like little robots. And then we're like, holy crap, this isn't what I wanted to be doing. How did I get here? And it goes back to who's navigating for you, who's in your driver's seat. So, okay. We've talked a lot. People are like in the fetal position on the floor. We should let them go so they can process all this information. Speaking of processing all this information, Stephanie, I think we will provide maybe a cool little and worksheet probably are a little bit might be an oxymoron, but we will provide a thoughtful resource for you if you would like to start to learn what your descriptions are, starting to put yourself, your soul, your social justice into words, because I think that's where we learn, right? is that when we start to describe these things for ourselves, recognizing that it's not a one size fits all, we're doing the best that we can to describe what we mean when we talk about these. And if these definitions or these descriptions resonate with you, we encourage you to continue to listen and be part of our community, because I think that there's probably some alignment there.
Yeah. So we would love for you all to continue with us and engage with us, and we would love for you to continue in this conversation with us. So if you want to interact with us, please join us on Instagram at graftedrootsmn, or check us out on our webpage at graftedroots.net. We'd love to have you. Thank you.
All right. See you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Unexamined Me, the podcast of the Grafted Roots community. Music for Unexamined Me was produced by Ross Walgren of Effective FX. Find him at effective-fx.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a friend who needs to hear this message. It really does help us grow.
Okay, I'll say that again because I forgot. Hell, it's called. Okay. 3, 2, 1.